I'm here at the Port of Seattle headquarters with Joel Loveland from, I'm going to do it over.
Okay. Take your time.
You want me to do a countdown?
Just, make yourself comfortable.
Okay. Countdown or not?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. 3, 2. I'm here at the Port of Seattle headquarters. Used to be an old warehouse. They restored it. They've done quite an impressive job. I'm here with Joel Loveland from the Lighting Design Lab and the University of Washington's Architecture Department. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you.
Why would the designers have wanted to bring so much light into this space? It's really quite striking.
Well, our work shows most recently at the Lighting Lab and the Pacific Gas and Electric Lab, their recent research, that this daylight is a much more productive environment than the electric lighting schemes that we saw in the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s. It's an exciting blend of north light, south light, light shimmering off the water, diffuse light coming in from above, no direct sunlight in the space, which are critical issues to a good lighting design. The electric lighting system seems to be well integrated. It's turning itself off primarily during the daytime when there's plenty of daylight. And we see an exciting design range of spaces related to the proportioning of the space and daylight.
Okay. And does it do anything for the people that work in here?
Well, what we found, or what I should say Pacific Gas and Electric has found, is that people work much more productively under daylight. They find much higher retail sales under daylight, 40% higher retail sales in spaces that are daylit versus non-daylit. And kids seem to learn more in spaces that are daylit. We've seen increased test scores in the range of 20 to 35% related directly to daylight.
It's impressive.
The kids seem to attach very closely to the diffuse nature of daylight. There was actually an inverse correlation of learning in spaces where direct sunlight penetrated the space. So it's important to remember that when we talk about daylight, we're talking about the diffusion of sunlight or the diffuse light of the overcast sky or the blue sky of the clear sky. It's an extremely important thing to remember when we're thinking about energy efficiency, because we need to learn to turn the electric lights off when the daylight is there, and we need to keep in mind that the sunlight can really be an enemy of an energy efficient building, increasing its cooling and heating loads.
Now, I've heard about the studies that have been done with the schools, and I've heard about the studies in retail environments where daylighting is beneficial. Has there been any study that you're aware of about employees in the office buildings?
There's several studies where, related to office building and workplace productivity improvements related to light. The difficulty here is finding markers or metrics to indicate increased performance and productivity. What I like to say is if you took the lowest numbers that we found in schools, 20%, and applied those numbers to the workplace, which we all know that most workers want to be at the perimeter. If you look in this space, we find the executive offices all at the perimeter. So there's an affection for the view and for the daylight. If we took those numbers from the schools and applied them to the workplace, we find that the average Puget Sound office worker makes about $30,000 a year and occupies about 150 square feet of floor space in a typical office space. So that worker costs the employer roughly $75,000 a year. If we can get a 20% improvement in their productivity, like what we saw in the schools, that improvement in productivity would equal $15,000 in the first year after the daylit building was occupied. You know what's amazing is there's a correlation then to the amount of space that that worker occupies and the cost of it, which would be about $100 a square foot or $15,000. So by daylighting a space, we can find that we can actually pay for the entire construction cost of the space just in worker productivity improvements in the first year.
That's very impressive. Anything else you wanted to say about daylighting and productivity?
Oh, I don't know. What else could we say about that? I think I about shot my wad at productivity.
Okay. Let's see. Maybe we can touch on some of the design features and see if we can get some shots of those. Maybe the glass in the corridor downstairs.
I wonder if it'd be good to bring you up at this point, and we could look at some of the things that are up here. Is that possible?
Joel, what were some of the design features which were used in this building?
Well, first of all, this
Actually, let me
building...
do that
Okay.
over, because I'm going to specifically say daylighting.
Okay.
3, 2. Joel, what were some of the design features that were used in this building to bring more lighting? One more time. 3, 2. Joel, what were some of the design features that were used in this building to bring more daylight into the space?
Well, there are a series of kind of cascading ideas that an architect or a contractor, builder, developer needs to think about when they're doing a daylit building. What we look at is the general overall shape of the building. It's elongated east and west, and it has a great deal of south and north exposure, which makes us have the greatest access to the greatest controllable light. The east and west, there's a lot of heat gain and a lot of problems associated to glare and overheating and cooling loads. North and south are extremely well controlled, and we see lots of north glazing here, tiered all the way across the occupant floor on the worker floor of the second floor. Now, I think we need to start over again somehow.
Just go anywhere.
Okay.
We'll just cover it with photos and stuff.
Okay. Should I do the little countdown thing? Does that work well?
Sure.
Okay.
Don't say 1, as you can tell.
Okay. 3, 2. This building has a lot of north-facing clear stories cascading all the way across the office space on the second floor, and has deep set clear stories across the south side of the same space on the second floor. It has large amounts of south glazing that are well shaded, with glazing types that are very well suited to controlling the heat gain. So what we see in all is a building with lots of surface area, with extremely well-controlled glazing areas, which can be very problematic in a poor design, but here carefully designed to control sunlight and to bring a great deal of daylight into almost all of the occupied spaces. We also see an electric lighting system which is extremely well calibrated on the second floor to the daylight, where the electric lighting system is turning itself off as it's calibrated and photocell controlled to the amount of daylight in the space. If we begin to look at the individual offices, it's an interesting idea about open office plans and security. And we see a series of hard-walled offices at the perimeter, but they're mainly glazed hard walls, which allow the daylight to come through the private offices and into the more interior offices of the space. The spaces that require even more security are actually positioned in the more solid portions, core portions of the building. Even though they're perimeters, they also have glass walls to bring light into the corridors, which is extremely important in reducing energy use for electric lighting in buildings.
Probably also bring some light to those individuals that, that sit closer, that sit away from the windows.
Right, right. What's interesting in a space like this, when it's so well connected to daylight, is in a very bright, sunlit summer day, there could be very high illumination levels in here, but our expectation is higher illumination levels, higher levels of light during times when it's bright outside. On the other hand, when it's darker outside in December, in those dark overcast days, we're going to see low levels of illumination in here with a complementary electric light, so that we'll see a really even and well-distributed light, very coincident with the patterns of light of day.
And I've noticed that some of the exterior offices have glass walls. Why would the designers have done that?
The primary interest in including glass wall, one, I suspect there's an issue of communications, so that there's greater office productivity. But secondly, there clearly is an idea of sharing the daylight. The richest sources of daylight are at the perimeter of the building. And when we start to see deeper office plans, although this isn't an extremely deep office plan, the resource of daylight becomes isolated from the interior, and the glass walls begin to share the wealth of the perimeter to the interior spaces.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you wanted to cover?
I can't think of anything at the point.
Okay. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Beyond the Badge, and what a significant major milestone we're celebrating. This is our 50th show, and what better place to acknowledge this achievement than by standing in the Museum of Flight on the south end of Boeing Field. Now, with 50 shows under our belt, hopefully we've brought to you stories that have been helpful and that assisted you in some manner, maybe even prevented you from having to call us for assistance at 911. Now, with Beyond the Badge, we're going to continue to provide you with information we hope you'll find helpful, like in this month's edition. In the news, Detective Tina Drain will be introducing you to a horrible crime, and that's abuse against animals, and how this issue of abuse and control over one animal can often lead into that same type of horrible treatment in other relationships. In our Up Close segment, Officer Sean Whitcomb looks at our pawn shop unit and what role it plays in successfully tracking down stolen property, and what property owners can do to increase their chances of recovering their property in the event they've become the victim of theft or crimes. Now, with school starting right around the corner, we're going to spend some time with our school emphasis team officers and learn what parents and guardians need to be aware of to help ensure their children start the school year in a safe environment. We've got a lot to cover. This is our 50th show. Let's get started.
In this month's edition of In the News, we're looking at the issue of animal cruelty and the link between a person who would abuse an animal using power and control and then carry that aggression to other relationships in their lives. Sadly, this is all too common an occurrence. An example, today's headline. 19-year-old arrested in attack that killed 19 calves. At Beyond the Badge, we look at this issue from a law enforcement perspective, a mental health perspective, and a humane society perspective. What does this say about us as a society that we might turn our heads the other way when we see someone being mean to a pet? Is it really just a family matter? Or is it a sign of something that, left unchecked, will become a societal problem? We spoke with Detective Pam McCammon, investigator in the Domestic Violence Unit, as she discussed the connection between violence and animal cruelty.
Cruelty to animals is, in fact, illegal. It's a criminal behavior. It is a criminal act, whether it's related to domestic violence or not. In the domestic violence laws, basically you're looking at two different degrees, and it's an RCW, a Revised Code of Washington, and both are considered animal cruelty. One is first degree, and that's where there is intent that can be proven, which is sometimes difficult. Intent, and then also some type of substantial suffering that the animal endures. We've seen a correlation in domestic violence for many years, but I think what we're trying to do now is get the awareness out a little bit more so that we can be a little more proactive on different levels and not just finally when an investigation is underway. Of course, I'm not a psychologist, but the research that has been done shows that there are many motivations and many possible reasons for people to abuse animals and pets. Some of those, and I can just name a few, some are actually control of the victim in a situation where there is domestic violence going on. If an abuser knows for a fact that the victim, who he or she has power and control over, is very fond of or loves a pet, then they can easily use the threat of hurting that pet or actually hurting the pet as a control mechanism toward a victim. Sometimes it is used as an isolation mechanism for a victim as well. You know, threatening, if you go or if you do this or if you tell, I'm going to hurt the animal. That's another thing that is often used. Sometimes it's merely an act of aggression that is basically uncontrolled. You know, a lot of folks with anger management difficulties and aggression problems will use or act out against a pet. And normally in that situation, it usually doesn't stop at the pet. It's either going on to higher levels and people at the same time, or it accelerates to that point.
Pets in households, over 50% of the households in the United States have pets in their families. And a tremendous portion of them, they're a part of the family. They're like a child. And power and control can be used with the animals by either threatening, say, to the child or to the partner, you know, if you don't do this, I'm going to do something to the animal. I'm going to kill it, I'm going to kick it, or whatever. It's also a way of actually, if a person does something to an animal, like throws a cat against the wall or something, basically what that is saying to the child or the other person is, this can happen to you, or you're next. It's a threat, a veiled threat to the other person when I do something to an animal. A behavior doesn't have to be repeated over and over and over again. If a behavior is done once and the person has a sense that this could really happen, I could get hurt, my pet could get hurt or something, all the perpetrator has to do is give them a look, or they may just mention it. I mean, they don't have to do the behavior over and over and over again, because they've got that control over the other person, because they know, uh-oh, if I don't do something, something's going to happen to my animal. It also can be used, there's also times that people use them where they actually would force the child to do something to the animal. And so the child can be extremely impacted by having to do something, and in some cases killing the animal. They can be tremendously traumatized by that. But a lot of it is, I think, threats, verbal threats of doing something to the animal, or actually doing something to the animal and having it come across like, this could be you.
We just handled about 2 or 3 months ago, and basically it was a situation where male, female were living together, married for 4 or 5 years. They had a small son, I believe a 2-year-old, and they also had 2 small dogs in the home, 2 pets, Chihuahuas. And for some reason, the male in this household, and unfortunately he also had some difficulties with alcohol, had abused and assaulted the female in the household in front of the 2-year-old. And at one point in another assault, he chose to grab a hold of one of the Chihuahuas. And as you well know, Chihuahuas are pretty small dogs, and the fellow was, near 200 pounds. And he chose to, he was mad at the woman, and so he chose to attempt to strangle the dog in front of both the female and the small child.
The most important thing for the community to know is that animal abuse needs to be taken seriously, and that people should not turn away from it, they should not ignore it, they should not say, oh, kids will be kids. The community needs to take animal abuse seriously. This means that law enforcement officials need to pursue cases of animal abuse and prosecute them fully. The social service community needs to get perpetrators of animal abuse the help that they need in order to break the cycle of abuse.
There's usually some other psychological issues happening there. I think if you look at, Ted Bundy, the Dahmers out there, and you look at their childhood history, you'll see that there's a disconnect somewhere that is causing these folks to in most cases actively abuse animals. They're injuring them, they're killing them, they're mutilating them. There's just a variety of things that happen. Now, we do come across some instances of just flat out stupidity. There were kids that were teasing a dog, they were hitting it or tapping it with a stick. We try to mitigate and educate some of those folks. But then there are quite a few instances where there are some active incidents where people are throwing their animals to the ground. They have allowed the animal's collar to grow into its neck. There are just some things that are just real blatant, and those blatant instances of animal cruelty are the things that we're interested in. We need to be able to respond to those, and we need the citizens to come forward and be willing to place a simple phone call and inform us of what's going on in their neighborhood. The community can call 386-PETS. That's 386-7387. It's a very easy number to remember. They can talk to a live person 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. In most cases, we can keep your information confidential under the state's public disclosure laws. I think the awareness is increasing. I've been with Seattle Animal Control for 13 years now. I began as a field officer. I don't know necessarily that we're seeing more incidents of animal abuse. It's out there, but we are starting to see more people who are taking the initiative to place that phone call to us. So the awareness is increasing. So our complaints or our requests for service are on the rise somewhat, but that's a good thing. I think that that's a societal trend that's showing that Seattle residents are not going to tolerate animal abuse. They're not going to allow these animals to suffer, and they're going to take it upon themselves to contact us and get some help. There's no misconception about animal abuse. It's flat out wrong. National studies have shown that there is a serious link between domestic violence, child abuse, and those people who abuse animals. Those people who abuse animals often go on in life to commit other crimes against people and property. And so it's very important for the community to take the initiative. Don't sit back and be the silent sufferers. And furthermore, allow the animals to be the silent sufferers. Call animal control, call the Seattle Police Department, get involved.
So as it was indicated in this segment, it's the responsibility of all of us to take action when we see signs of animal cruelty. No longer can we just turn our heads to this silent suffering. So if you think you're seeing signs of animal abuse, call 206-386-PETS or 911. You may be the first step in stopping a problem that, left unchecked, could grow into just another headline in the news.
Thanks, Tina. In this month's edition of Up Close, we'll be looking at pawn shops, the pawn shop unit, and the detectives that work closely with this area's pawn shops. Back in the 60s and the 70s, pawn shops had a slightly bad reputation as a place where no questions were asked and names or proper identification were not checked. However, that's changed. The pawn shops of today work very closely with the Seattle Police Department to make sure that everything's in compliance. Our pawn shop unit detectives make sure that property that is stolen will never be sold at pawn shops, and we'll also talk to some pawn shop owners that'll show you what they're doing on their end to make sure that names are checked, identifications checked, as well as serial numbers, and that all necessary paperwork is completed. To show you how the pawn shops have changed over the past 20 years, we'll talk with pawn shop unit detective Bob Seavey.
The relationship between our unit and the pawn shop in the industry is actually probably as best as you can get. We have a good, solid relationship. The state and city ordinance requires that pawn shops give to the police department, the chief law enforcement officer, a copy of their transactions, both buys and pawns, daily. Small departments will have detectives that sometimes they'll work on part-time pawn shop issues, and they'll work on arsons, or they'll work on homicides. It's not specialized. In our department, we're the only detective unit that actually deals with the pawn transactions, and that is provided to us daily. And we have a secretary that enters that into a database every day. In the city of Seattle, we run somewhere in the neighborhood of 140 to 150,000 transactions a year. And some shops are much busier than others. It's all about location. That's just like anything else involving business. If you have a good location, you're going to do well. But I believe the transactions have varied somewhere between 140 to 150,000 a year. The items that are serialized items such as TVs, guns, bicycles, tools, that serial number is entered into a national database. It's checked against a national database, I should say, to determine if that serial number is listed as stolen. And when we get what we call a stolen hit, then we will turn that hit into an investigation and determine if the item is in fact stolen, or it's a duplicate serial number, or it's a serial number that items share, which can happen. The misconception that the community a lot of times have when they call us is they think that we can find something that has been stolen from them. Particularly, the biggest misconception is jewelry. Jewelry is hard to trace. There's no serial number. 1 to 18-inch gold herringbone chain looks like any other 18-inch herringbone chain. With jewelry, the way we find jewelry is usually suspect information. If the victim knows the suspect, if it's a relative or a friend or an acquaintance.
Now that you've heard from Detective Seavey, we're going to visit some of the area's pawn shops and talk to some of the owners to see exactly what they're doing to make sure their business operates above the law. Here's the owner of Aurora Loans.
The main reason we don't like to take in stolen goods is because I don't believe it's right. Beyond that, financially it has a cost to us. When we give money on an item that turns out to be stolen, we lose the item, we lose the money, we lose the use of the money. It's just a lose-lose deal for us. Worked real hard to get IDs, certainly descriptions. If the serial number's been altered or removed, we don't take it. Try to deal with just straight up honest people. Well, the way we work together with the police department, or one way, is that if there's an item that is reported stolen, we would try not to take the item first and foremost. And if we didn't, we would maybe get a license number or a serial number and pass the information on to the police. Recently, we had a situation where a bike was reported stolen, and we did have some good information on the bike. We were able to get the police here, and they matched up the information with the police report, and they arrested the man right on the spot and returned the bike. Well, I think the way the pawn shops have changed the most is that we're reporting electronically. Serial numbers and everything are provided, and they're processed in a matter of days instead of weeks like they used to be. I think the best way to increase your chances of recovering stolen property would be to have the serial number, make and model written down, and maybe even a picture to go along with it.
Easiest thing for the community to do to assist us would be to keep a record of their serial numbers of serialized items such as TVs, VCRs, video recorders, DVDs, cameras, anything that has a serial number. By keeping a record of it, if that item is stolen, then they can report that serial number at the time of the police report. That serial number will get entered into the national database, and we can check anything that's pawned against that.
So there you have it. Our local pawn shops working closely with the Seattle Police to make sure that the pawn shops of the 60s and 70s, where names and proper identification were not an issue, stay just a distant memory. Next up is our Neighborhood Focus segment, and we'll show you exactly what our department's doing to work closely with schools to keep them safe and to build relationships with students in this upcoming school year.
Hello, I'm CSO Brad Hoover, and September is here. It's the month where all of Seattle's youth go back to school. And with that, many parents have concerns over school safety. Well, here at Beyond the Badge, we're looking at the relationship between school emphasis team officers and the Seattle School District. We'll talk with some of the officers assigned to some of our area's schools and hear from them on how they work to build relationships and break down barriers and work with school officials in order to provide a safe environment for all our kids. Here's School Emphasis Officer Kevin O'Neill.
I think the school emphasis team is part of patrol. We are a patrol function. We handle all of the issues at the school that a regular 911 responding patrol officer would have to do if we weren't here. I think that's important for the community to know. We are there. We're regular police. We're not fake police. We have all the duties and the responsibilities of a regular officer, and we handle those issues on a daily basis. If there's something going on, we're the first ones to be handled. All of the officers are attached to the administrators through a pager system. They page us if they have a problem, and we respond readily if we're not already at the school. And the officers handle sections of the north end of the city. So we all have responsibilities of multiple schools. It's not just one school. We have one primary high school, but we have several elementary, middle schools, and some private schools in that area of the city that we're responsible for.
I've been a school resource officer going on 2 years. This is actually my third school year coming up. And all the students that I've worked with has been completely positive. I've actually had students who say to me that they didn't like the police, but they liked me. And there are some walls that we're breaking down there. How I break down these walls, the only way to do that is to effectively communicate with the students. Sometimes that can be difficult because we may all speak English, but sometimes we don't speak the same language. So what I try to do whenever I walk into a room, whether it be students or citizens or anything like that, I try to observe, listen to them, see who the leaders are, talk to them, and then talk to them on their level. And I find that once we get, we're speaking the same language and we can communicate with one another, that's how we can break down those walls.
Before we had the school emphasis teams, our patrol officers were the ones that had to go and handle problems in the school. Well, of course, that takes a patrol officer off the street. Rarely will you get the same patrol officer 2 or 3 times responding to a specific school, so you always have a different person coming in, so now the faculty and the students have to get to know another officer during that brief encounter. And a lot of times the problems just really weren't solved. And again, while officers are handling the problem, patrol officers are handling the problems in the schools, you've got problems happening in the streets that aren't being addressed as they should be. So having a focus group of officers who can address concerns directly at the school and alleviate, or I should say relieve officers, the patrol officers, from having to respond to those kinds of concerns all the time has done a great deal. And I think the officers on the street appreciate having those school officers there, not only from the standpoint of the fact that they don't have to handle those problems personally, constantly, but that if they do have to go to a school on those rare occasions, a lot of times that school officer is there to assist them, or there's been that relationship developed between the faculty and the students and that officer, so that when those officers go in there, the students and faculty already kind of know how to address the situation, and it helps the officer quite a bit.
Beyond the Badge has had a chance to talk with Larry Farrar, head of school security for Seattle Public Schools, and he discusses his viewpoint on how safe the Seattle schools are and how the Seattle Police Department and the school district can work together to maintain a safe environment.
We expect several different things out of the Seattle Police Department when they assign officers to our schools. One, we want to develop a good relationship with law enforcement. We want to make sure that our kids are as safe and as secure environment as we can possibly make it. We want to see them as a role model and as a mentor for the students. We want to make sure that it's a positive relationship and that we are dealing in a positive manner with law enforcement. If I could talk to the parents of the students in the Seattle School District, what we would look at is we'd want them to know that we've done everything possible that we can think of and that we have seen throughout the United States to make their students safe. We're trying to do everything by teaming with the police department, by teaming with the fire department, by looking at the aid and assistance we can get from mental health professionals to make these schools just as safe and as secure as we can possibly make them.
We'd like to close out this segment with some safety tips from our school emphasis team. Many of these tips will address common concerns felt by returning students and parents alike.
Well, for any new students here at Garfield who aren't really familiar with the surrounding neighborhood or the campus itself, I would advise parents to tell their children, remember that they have lockers and what they're for. That not to leave purses, jackets, book bags, laptops, anything of value laying about. Don't leave it in your classroom and come back 3 periods later expecting it to be there. Don't leave it in the gym while you're playing basketball and expect it to be there. Those things, put it in your locker, and I guarantee you that you'll keep it.
Again, people need to, school zones, they need to slow down. People be writing tickets, those kinds of things. As far as their vehicles, students driving, maybe for the first time coming to school, be aware that there's other ones out there, there's little ones out there, as well as other students who aren't driving. Be aware of the school buses. Schools are, for the majority, a very good opportunity for personal safety to be in check, to go over the things that you normally go over in the community.
The school's safe. We don't have the type of violence that they have in other cities and things of that nature. There's potential for violence in everything, but ultimately the schools are safe. I've been working in Garfield for the last 2.5 years, and I can say with complete assurance that this is a safe school.
As far as summing up why the program works, especially within our unit, it's because of the relationships that the officers take the time to go out and get to know the students, get to know the faculty, get to know the administrators. And I think on all parts it's a respect level, and the officers are allowed to have that flexibility to do that.
Thank you for watching this segment of Neighborhood Focus. Now let's go back to the Museum of Flight with Detective Randy Curtis.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for show number 50 of Beyond the Badge. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you again next month on Beyond the Badge, and then in the very near future, we'll be celebrating show 100, right with you. If you have any suggestions or ideas as to what you'd like to see addressed on the next edition of Beyond the Badge, call the Seattle Police Department Video Unit at 206-684-7403. And to find out any information about upcoming events at this truly magnificent facility, the Museum of Flight, visit their website at www.museumofflight.org. You won't be disappointed. It's incredible. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next month.
Good morning. I'm Deputy Chief Clark Kimmer. I'm the Chief of Operations for the Seattle Police Department. I've been asked by Chief Gil Kurlikowski, who responded to the scene last night, to represent the issues surrounding this incident to the media. And by way of preface, I'd like to emphasize that this department, for some time now, under the direction of Chief Kurlikowski, has been firmly committed to provide as much information as we can for the media and for the community, provide them the facts that they need to help understand the issues that confront our officers. We need to keep in mind that these investigations are very complex, and what I'm providing to you can only be categorized truthfully as preliminary, and that as facts become known that are amplifications upon what I'm going to provide to you today, we will give you regular updates. But I ask that you understand, with all due respect, that we're in the process of a lot of work, and sometimes these investigations take weeks or even months to get all of the facts out. But what we know right now begins in time about 30 to 45 days ago. On October 31st, it came to the attention of the police department that there was a robber approaching victims at ATM machines in the East Precinct. As they were standing at the ATM machine, this individual would come up, physically accost them or threaten them, and in almost all circumstances, as time elapsed, either threaten, display, or use what all victims characterized as a weapon, as a gun, to coerce them to give money that they were withdrawing from the ATM machine. First incident occurred on Madison Street on October 31st. The next day, there were two incidents also in the area of Madison Street in the East Precinct. All told, as the month went on, there were at least 10 incidents of these ATM robberies, principally in the East Precinct. Now, on December 9th, that is Monday of this week, we began a stakeout of ATMs in the East Precinct in an attempt to protect people using ATMs and to apprehend this suspect. By this time, we have a pretty good picture of who the suspect is. African-American male, medium build, young, probably in the 20s, wearing a ski mask and a hooded sweatshirt. And in almost all cases, threatening, displaying, or implying the presence of a handgun. On December 9th, staking out various ATMs in the East Precinct, there was an ATM robbery that occurred on the 3600 block of Stone Way at the bank located on the corner there. So at that point, we now have a potential expansion of the area that these robberies are taking place in. The 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, which was last night, then were preoccupied by our teams of stakeout personnel, Seattle police officers from various units from within the department, both in the East Precinct and then also back at the location at 36 and Stoneway. We had no specific knowledge that any specific location was going to actually be the target of this armed robbery. But we were using the best information we had and our police abilities at analysis to place stakeout officers where there might be the possibility that such a robbery might occur. In fact, at 9:20, an individual victim approaching the ATM at 36 and Stone Way was assaulted and robbed by the suspect that was the subject of our police intervention. Bringing you up to that point then, I would like to turn this over to the Chief of Detectives, Assistant Chief Cindy Caldwell, who will give you the details of what occurred last night.
Thank you, Clark. Last night we had officers and detectives staking out 2 different locations in the city. One of them was at Capitol Hill in the area where several of the robberies had occurred, and the other area was in Wallingford where one other robbery had occurred. We had 7 officers hidden in the area around that bank